Hi friends, and thanks for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to show you how to make this super cute and sad My Melody, or she could really be making any face that you want. But yeah, she's my favorite Sanrio character. I love her so much, and I don't really tend to see so many crochet tutorials for her. So I just wanted to make one for you guys to follow along with. So let's just get right into it. The materials you're going to need are some white yarn and some pink yarn. I'm not super sure what the thickness of this is. I believe it's 3mm yarn. You're also going to need a hook. I'm using a 5mm hook. You're going to need a needle and a stitch marker and some glue. You're also going to need some stuffing. And for the face and eyes, you're going to need some felt, black and white felt specifically, and some eyeshadow. First, we're going to work on her head. So what you're going to do is grab your white yarn and create a magic circle or magic ring. There's multiple ways to do this, but this is how I like to personally do it. How I do it is you take the short end of the yarn and you put it over your two fingers and you wrap it around so that you have two loops on the back side of your hand. And then you're going to take your crochet hook, put it under the first loop, over the second one, and pull through. And then I like to put my finger here so I can keep this yarn in place. Take my fingers out and then take the long end of the yarn and wrap that around my finger or hand like I normally would, and just pull this taut so that you have technically a loop around your hook. Then I just create a stitch, and that's your magic ring. Next, we're going to single crochet 6 into the magic ring. So how to crochet into the magic ring is you put your hook into the ring and make sure that this string is on top of your hook. But yeah, you just put your hook into the ring, you pull through, you have two loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through. And that's your very first single crochet. You just keep doing this until you have 6 on your magic ring. So we already did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now that we have 6 single crochets in our magic ring, you're gonna grab this short little piece of yarn and pull, and that pretty much just tightens the loop and brings all of your stitches together. At this point, you can use a stitch marker if you want, but I feel like it's a little too small to use one, so I prefer to just count my stitches here. But next, we're going to increase into every single one of these single crochets. An increase is basically just crocheting twice in one stitch. So just find where your very first stitch was. For me, it's right there. Can be a little hard to put it in. Grab some yarn, pull through, and then that's your first single crochet. And then just do it again into the same stitch. And that's your second single crochet, and you effectively did an increase. Do this until you have done 12 total stitches. After you've done your 12 stitches, this is what your circle should look like, and we've just completed the second row. For the third row, we'll also be doing increases, but for every other stitch. So I'm just going to single crochet for the first stitch 1 time, and this is where I want to use my stitch marker to basically just indicate that this is the very first stitch of every row. So once I've placed my stitch marker in here, I know that this is where the row should end. So you've done your first single crochet, then you go into the next stitch and you do an increase. So 2 single crochets. And then for the next one, you just do 1 single crochet. And for the next one, you just do 2 single crochets. And you should do this until you get all the way to the other end. So I've just completed my third row, and it's time to do our fourth row. So I'm going to crochet into where I have my stitch marker and do 1 single crochet. And then I'm going to remove my stitch marker and place it into the stitch that I just did. Again, that way I know that this is the very first stitch of the row that I'm on. In a similar pattern as our last row, we're going to be doing 2 single crochets and then an increase. So I've just done 1, another single crochet, and then an increase. Sorry, my yarn is quite squeaky. And then you're just going to repeat this all the way around. So again, one single crochet, another single crochet, and then an increase of 2 single crochets in the same stitch. And then you just do that all the way around. So I've just completed my 4th row, and this is our very last row of increases. For our 5th row, we're just going to single crochet into every stitch like normal with no increases. So I'm going to just single crochet into the stitch where I have my stitch marker again. I'm going to move my stitch marker like last time and place it in the stitch that I just made. And then I'm just going to single crochet all the way around. So I've just finished the last stitch of my 5th row. And then I'm going to pretty much do the same exact thing again for 2 more rows. So in the end, you should have 4 rows of increases and 3 rows of normal stitches. So I've just done my 3 normal crochet rows, and at this point I like to turn my project inside out so that the X's are on the outside. I hope that makes sense. This changes depending on if you're crocheting over or under, as in when you put in your crochet hook. If you put the yarn under or over. I personally like to crochet under, and so then my X's are on the inside, so I just like to turn it inside out. But you do whatever looks best or works best for you. Anyways, now that we've done that, we can start doing our decreases. So first, I'm just going to single crochet 2. So 1 single crochet, and then moving the stitch marker again, and then another single crochet. And then I'm going to do an invisible decrease. In case you don't know how to do an invisible decrease, what you do is you just go into the outside loops instead of both of them. So typically you would insert your hook like this, but for an invisible decrease, you just want to insert your hook into the outside loop. And then when you do an invisible decrease doing a single crochet, you insert your hook into the first outside loop and then also the second outside loop in the second stitch. You pull through your yarn and then you do your single crochet as normal. So after doing the decrease, we're going to crochet 2 stitches again, and then we're going to do a decrease again. So insert into the 2 outside loops, pull through, and then pull through. And that's your decrease. And then you just do that in that pattern until you get all the way around again. Now that I've finished this row, I'm going to do another row of decreases. This time we're going to single crochet 1 time and then decrease 1 time. So you just decrease every other stitch. So I'm just going to do my first stitch, my decrease, and then another single crochet, and then another decrease, and so on until you get to the very last stitch again. Now that you've finished your row, in this next row, we're going to be doing decreases for every single stitch. So you're just going to do that until you get all the way around to your last stitch. Now that you finished that row, it's time to use some stuffing and stuff your ball. Right now it looks really sad, but once you stuff it, it'll look a lot more plump. I just like to grab some stuffing and use my finger, but if that's too difficult, you can use something with a flat edge just to poke that inside as well. Once you feel like you've stuffed your ball enough, this is where you can stop and close your hole. I know some people like to do 1 last row of single crochets, but I feel like it personally looks a little too bulky. I also like to understuff my crochet plushies, but I know some people like to overstuff them. Just do what's most comfortable for you. Once you feel like you've stuffed it enough and you're ready to close your hole, you can grab some scissors and leave a generous tail, since this is what we're going to be using to sew up the hole, and just cut that off, and then put this into your crochet loop so that it is sealed and tightened off. Now we're going to use this piece of yarn to weave it into these crochet loops so that we can pull it taut and close the hole. I'm just going to remove my stitch marker, and I personally like to do this with a crochet hook, but you can also use a needle. And what I do is I just like to insert my hook into maybe 2 stitches at a time, and I like to go into the outside loops. So I go into this outside loop and into the next outside loop, and I just grab the yarn and pull it through. And then I just do this again. So maybe this time I'll do 3 outside loops if I can, and then grab the yarn and just pull that through. And I'm going to do this into the last 2 stitches. So again, 2 outside loops and grab the yarn and pull through. And if I tug, you'll see that that closes the hole. And just to secure it, I'm going to tie a double knot. So I like to tie a double knot by tying a normal knot, but then putting my yarn through the loop again, and then pulling that really nice and taut, and you've pretty much finished your My Melody head. And I just like to tuck this in. I take my crochet hook and kind of just go in randomly in the head somewhere and find where this piece of yarn is, and I just pull it through. And I pull it nice and taut so that the knot is hidden inside. And then I just grab my scissors and I snip that off. And if you just squish it a little bit, you'll see that it'll hide itself inside. But yeah, you finished the very first step to creating your My Melody. Now, creating My Melody's little cap or hat is going to be really similar to how we made her head. So we're going to do a magic ring again. Just loop around your 2 fingers like last time, insert your hook and pull through the second loop. And then just slip stitch 1 and then single crochet 6 times into the magic ring. And then tug your yarn and then increase into every single one of these stitches until you have a total of 12 stitches. Now that I've finished my 12 stitches, my row of increases, I'm going to do again the same thing that we did with My Melody's head, where we're going to increase into every other stitch. So single crochet, increase, single crochet, increase. And again, I'm just going to insert my stitch marker into the very first stitch I make. So I just do my first stitch, insert the stitch marker, increase, and then just do this again all the way around. For our next row, again, we're just going to crochet 2 single crochets and then an increase. So 2 single crochets, increase, 2 single crochets, increase, and so on until you get all the way to the other end. Now that you've done your row of increases, we're just going to single crochet all the way around, and we're going to do that for 6 rows. And this is pretty much what's going to make the body of your My Melody hat. So again, just single crochet all the way around, no increases for 6 rows. After you've finished your 6 rows of single crochets, now it's time to do 2 rows of decreases. So for the first one, you're going to decrease every 2 stitches. So single crochet, and then decrease. And then for the second row, you're going to decrease every other stitch. So let's just do the first row first. So I'm just going to single crochet, and then I'm going to single crochet again, and then I'm going to do an invisible decrease just like before. And then I'm just going to do that all the way around. So single crochet, decrease until I get to the very other side. Now that we've done our first row of decreases, we're going to do our second row. But before doing that, we're going to do 2 things. The first thing we're going to do is turn this inside out, and we're going to tie this thread that was initially here when we did our magic ring. Doing this will just prevent the cap from getting loose. You should also do this in your ball as well, but if you don't, it's not a big deal. So after we've tied this up, we're just gonna turn it back inside in, I guess. And then I'm actually gonna take My Melody's head and then put it inside the cap and kind of position it how I want My Melody to look. I'm kind of just twisting her head around and getting the position that I want. And the reason I put her head in now is because when we do the last row of decreases, it's actually going to be really hard to get her head in there. And so it's best to just do the row of decreases while her head is already inside. So now that it's inside and I'm happy with the position, I'm going to go ahead and do the last row of decreases. Again, you just decrease every other stitch. So I'm just going to crochet 1, and I'm not going to remove the stitch marker since this is the very last row anyway, but I just crocheted 1, and then I'm going to just do the invisible decrease and then single crochet 1, and then again just alternate with single crochets and invisible decreases all the way around. Now that we finished our last row of decreases, you can see My Melody's little face inside her cap. I think it's so cute, and we just grab some scissors and again just snip this off, and then after you've snipped off the yarn, you can just place it inside your crochet loop and tug really well so that it's secure, and you can pretty much sew this in anywhere you'd like, or you can just tuck it in inside, whatever is more comfortable for you. I just like to tuck it in, so I'm gonna just grab my hook and put it randomly somewhere inside the cap, and I'm just gonna grab the yarn and pull through. And again, I'm going to tug so that the seam where we tied it off isn't visible. And then I'm just going to snip off any excess yarn. And that's pretty much our My Melody's head. Now we can move on to the ears. For the first set of ears, it's really simple. We're just going to do a magic ring again, and then crochet 6 into our magic ring again, like last time, starting with a slip stitch and then crocheting 6. And then after you've crocheted 6, you just tug the magic ring and crochet increases in each of the 6 stitches until you have 12 all around. After you've crocheted 12, now you're just going to crochet 6 rows of normal single crochets with no increases, and that's effectively gonna create the length of My Melody's ears. Once you've crocheted your 6 rows, you can just go ahead and snip off your yarn and then just do a slip stitch and tighten that to fasten off your yarn. And then again, the same as previously, just turn your work inside out so that you can tie a knot where your magic ring was so that this doesn't get undone. Sorry if the camera angle change is jarring, it's a new day. But anyway, once you finish crocheting your first ear, now it's time to crochet the second one. So similar to how we started the first ear, we're just going to do a magic ring again, and then we're going to crochet 6 into the magic ring. Once you've crocheted 6 and tugged your string, now it's time to crochet an increase into every single one of these stitches, just like before. Now that you've finished crocheting your increases, it's time to just crochet 2 normal rows with no increases. Once you've crocheted 2 of your normal rows, it's time to crochet 1 row of decreases where you're going to decrease into every single stitch. The reason we're going to do this is that doing the decreases helps bend the ear and make it look not so bulky. So you're just gonna decrease for every single one of these stitches until you have a total of 6 stitches. After you've done your row of decreases, it's time to do a row of increases, but instead of doing an increase in every single stitch, we're only gonna do an increase in every other stitch until we have a total of 9 stitches. The reason is if we do an increase in every single stitch, the ear is gonna be way too wide and look really bulky, so we want it to be a little slimmer down the bottom. So just do an increase in every other stitch until you have a total of 9. Once you've done your row of increases and you have 9 stitches, it's time to just do 3 more rows of normal crochets with no increases. Now that you've finished your 3 rows of normal crochets, it's time to just do a slip stitch, cut your yarn, and fasten off. And that's your second ear. And again, if you want, you can tie this into a knot, the piece of yarn that's attached from your magic circle, if you're worried about this unraveling. So you've just finished your 2 ears, and this is what your My Melody should look like. So you have the first ear and then the second ear, which is going to bend and look like this. Now that you have your 2 ears, you can start stuffing them with some stuffing. Again, you can kind of just stuff them however much you want. I just take in a small amount and just put it into the ear until I'm satisfied with the amount. And again, I kind of like to understuff my plushies, but you can just add however much you like. When stuffing the bent ear, make sure not to stuff the bulbous part at the top too much, because when it's bent, it's going to be quite big anyway, and if you stuff it too much, it's going to look a little odd. So be sure to understuff this part of the ear. Once you've stuffed your two ears, it's time to sew. A little life hack for sewing parts of a plushie is to grab the yarn that you used, so the same color as the yarn you were using, and then to separate it. So this yarn, I'm just going to tug and separate. Now that you've separated your yarn, you can use this piece of string to sew the ears together because it'll match the color of her ears perfectly. The way I like to sew ears is I grab my needle and I just put the string through. I like to tie a knot at the end just as a safety measure, and then I grab the ear that I want to sew on, and this is the point where you decide, you know, where you want the ears to be, which side of the head you want to be the top and the bottom. I've decided I want to sew the ear here, and the way I like to sew the ears together is by putting my needle in somewhere that I feel connects the head to the ear, and then going in through the outside loops of where I crocheted. So not necessarily going in somewhere super out here and not going into the inside loops. I like going into the outside loops and not tugging too hard since this knot isn't so big. And then pretty much just repeating that all the way around. So again, I'm just going into My Melodies' head and going into the outside loop and just tugging gently. And I just do this all the way around. If you have a piece of yarn from your ear sticking out, this is a good time to just tuck that in so that it doesn't pop out and bother you while you're sewing the ear on. Once you've crocheted the ear all the way around and you've gotten back to where your end is, just tie these two pieces together. I like to tie a double knot to make sure that it's super secure, and snip the excess yarn off. And then I'm just going to use my crochet hook to tuck these inside the ear. So I have my crochet hook. I'm just going to wrap these around the hook and then use that to tuck them in. And if they're popping out on the other side, I just snip off any excess. And you've successfully crocheted your first ear. For the next ear, it's pretty much the same thing, just place it where you want it to be and sew all the way around. Now that you've crocheted your second ear, you might think that your My Melody looks a little wonky, but that'll be fixed by bending the second ear down. And the way we're going to do that is that we're going to stitch this part of the ear down into her little hat to make sure that it stays in place. So grab your needle and thread once again and just find maybe somewhere around here in the ear and pull through, and then pretty much stick that right into the very edge of where you can find My Melodies' hat. And then I like to go back into where I just was again so that it's super secure, and then tug the yarn and tug the other side too so that it's super stuck on there. And at this point you can tie a really tight knot, and then to further give some support, I'm going to grab this yarn and tuck it in somewhere into My Melodies' hat. I'm just going to repeat that again a couple times so that her ear is super secure and fixed on there. So after I've done a few rounds, I'm just going to tie these two ends together once again. Make sure to tie this super tight, and then I'm going to snip off any excess and weave in these tails using my crochet hook. So we've just finished My Melody's body. I think she's looking super cute. I love the way her ear just bends. And now it's time to do the face. For the face and accessories, you can use black and white felt, but you can really use whatever color you want. I know sometimes My Melody has like brown eyes, so you can use that too. For the black felt, I'm going to cut some string for her eyes. I do like the way I did her eyes here, but I think I'm gonna try a different approach this time. If you do want to do these eyes, you just need to cut 2 black circles and then 2 white circles, but I'm gonna try and give her some V eyes instead. So for the V eyes, what I'm gonna do is cut a long and thin strip. Try and cut the felt as thin as you can. I know it can be kind of tough. This is as thin as I was able to get it. Next, I'm going to cut her mouth, which is again just going to be a little piece of felt, and her eyes are going to look something like this. The final step is to just grab your glue and glue your facial features onto the head. Before using the glue, I'm just going to place the pieces on her face to kind of just figure out where I would like them to be spaced, if they're too big or too small. Like right now that I have them on her face, I feel like the eyes are a little too big, so I might try and make them a little thinner so that they take up less space on her face. And once you've kind of placed everything and you're happy with the placement, you can just go ahead and glue everything on. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make some of these a little thinner and shorter. So I know that I want the mouth to go somewhere over here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and place some glue and stick the mouth on. Make sure to get glue that also dries clear. Next is the eyes. So I'm pretty happy with the placement of the eyes and the mouth. So I'm just gonna let that dry. And while that dries, we can start making her little accessory. I know sometimes she has a little flower, sometimes she has a blue bow, but for this version, I'm gonna make a flower. So to make the flower, I'm just going to cut it out of some white felt. If it's easier for you, you can draw the design on, but I think I'm just gonna freehand the flower. So here's the little flower design that I went for. And if you want your flower to be yellow on the inside, this is where you can use your eyeshadow. Make sure to get an eyeshadow palette that has a lot of different colors on it. This one I think was just like $5. And I'm gonna use this brush and I'm gonna dab on the teeniest amount, and I'm just going to brush it on to this flower. So I've brushed on my little yellow flower design and I can now glue it on. So I've kind of just decided that I want to place it over there. I'm gonna add a generous amount of glue, maybe that much, and I'm just gonna place it on. Just like that. Next, I'm gonna do My Melody's little blush. I'm gonna go in with the lighter pink shade, since the dark one can be really pigmented. You should try and be really careful when you do this blush part because this isn't reversible. It's really hard to clean off. So I've got just some pink on my brush and I'm going to very lightly brush it on. If you don't have a brush, you can also always just use a Q-tip, and that's pretty much it. You can always add the little blue tears on the sides too. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to add them like maybe right here, and that's pretty much it. I'm really happy with how this turned out. This is optional, but if you want, you can give My Melody a little yellow nose. I was actually looking back at her design and I completely forgot that she had one. So I just have some yellow embroidery thread and I'm gonna give her a nose maybe right here as well. This is super simple. Once you just thread on your embroidery thread, you can just go into where you want the nose to be and just maybe make a few loops. Try to not move anything around, especially if your glue hasn't dried down perfectly yet. Once you're happy with the nose, just be sure to tie it off and snip off any excess. And I just like to tuck any excess inside. And there you have your My Melody. I think these are really silly and really cute. If you want to make these a keychain, you can simply just chain a loop right from where her head is. So you can just take your pink yarn, or really whatever yarn color you want, make a slip knot. If you don't know how to make a slip knot, you just create a loop with the short side on the underside, and you grab the loop through with your finger and you tug, and you place your hook inside, and then you tug on the short end, and there you have your slip knot. Once you have your slip knot, you can just insert your hook into her hat, grab some yarn from the other side, and then do a slip knot or a slip stitch. It's a little hard to tug, so I'm just going to tug it with my finger. And then once you've done that, you can just go ahead and do a few chains. So once you have your desired amount of chains, just go back to where you made your very first chain. So mine is right here, and just do a slip stitch. Snip off the excess yarn and pull through and tug on that tightly, and now you have a little chain to hang your My Melody from. If you want, you can grab the excess yarn and tie a few double knots together so that they're nice and secure, and then either cut off the excess or tuck it in somewhere inside her hat. And there you have your super cute My Melody chains. Let me know if you guys like this tutorial, if you end up making these. If you're interested in more of my tutorials, I have a crochet dog sweater that you can check out. And that's pretty much it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!